Hi, hello, and welcome. My name is Ben Hasred. I hope you are having a wonderful day, morning, evening, or night, and if you go on to enjoy this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. It would really help me out. Anyway, William of Orange. Wrong guy. William the Bastard. Oh, he didn't like that name. William the Conqueror, who took the Duchy of Normandy and the Kingdom of England and just kind of mushed them into one under his rule. It is with William that I want to start a series on this channel, exploring each English king and queen, starting with old Willie himself. Now, some of you may be confused, as there were many kings, queens, kingdoms, etc. in England well before William. But he's the first one in the Horrible History song, so I'm just going to start with him. William, Henry, Stephen, Henry, Richard, John, Oi, Henry, Ed, Richard, do the free man. Born in 1027 or 1028 in the Duchy of Normandy, William had a rough start to life. His father was Robert I, Duke of Normandy, and his mother was not of very high standing. It's not known exactly what William's mother and her family did for a living, but some sources say tanning and tradesmanship, and others say that they were a member of the bourgeois class. This extramarital relationship produced William, leading to a damaged social standing from birth, becoming known as William the Bastard. However, he was the only male child of the Duke, meaning he was automatically the heir. And William would not have to wait long for his title, as his father passed away in 1035, on his return journey from a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, leaving behind a 7 or 8-year-old William as the new Duke. Obviously, being a literal child, as well as his damaged social standing, it caused a lot of issues in the dukedom, and so the duchy was in utter anarchy until 1047. During that time of anarchy, William passed through the care of many different people, because nobody could seem to stay alive for longer than a year when looking after the young Duke, including one of his guardians being killed in the same room as him whilst the young Duke slept. It even got so bad at one point that there were rumours that William had to stay in the houses of peasants in order to escape his would-be assassins. This conflict and anarchy came to a head in 1046, when Guy of Burgundy and many other nobles staged a rebellion, very nearly capturing William at Valois, where he escaped unscathed under the cover of darkness. He returned in 1047 with the King of France at the time, Henry I, and defeated the rebels, securing William's spot as the Duke. His next few years were spent fully subduing his vassals and nobles, and he soon developed into a capable administrator and leader. This angered King Henry, as previously, due to William's young age, he was fully subservient to the king. And as William was gaining independence, the king no longer had a lot of control over him. Wishing to regain this control, Henry staged multiple invasions of Normandy, losing each time to the emerging warlord William. In 1049, a union was arranged between William and Matilda of Flanders, the member of a very powerful noble house. This union was both condemned and forbidden by the Pope at the time. But despite this, the two married in the early 1050s, securing papal approval later down the line. It wasn't that important, I suppose. And the only way they were actually able to get this papal approval was by opening 2 brand new monasteries in Normandy. William and Matilda reportedly had an extremely good relationship, as proven by the 9 or 10 or so children that William and her had, as well as the fact that William never took any mistresses or saw anyone else, which was extremely unusual for the time, but just goes to show the strength of their relationship. In 1051, the first seeds of William's interest in England were planted, as the childless king, Edwin, seemed to choose William as his successor. This is because William was the grandson of Edward's uncle, Richard II of Normandy. As well as this, the reason why Edward seemingly chose a non-Englishman for the throne was because the most powerful family in England, the people that were likely to ascend to the throne if Edward still didn't have any children when he died, had been exiled, and so Edward needed to secure the throne. Although the entire family would soon return and regain their positions anyway, there was still that promise. William's next several years were not remotely focused on England, and instead he was aimed at the Duchy of Brittany, an independent land that directly bordered him. And reportedly, Harold, the son of Duke Godwin and a member of the powerful noble house, after gaining the title of Duke due to his father passing away, went on campaign with William in Brittany, with some sources even stating that Harold swore an oath to William to uphold his claim to the throne. However, this claim has been heavily debated, and could have just been made in order to make Harold look like an oathbreaker and a bad king. Nonetheless, King Edward died on the 5th of January 1066, and despite his apparent oath, Harold pushed for himself to be crowned king, and succeeded, becoming crowned as King Harold II of England. Evidently, William was outraged, as he believed his crown had been stolen from him, and so he began to prepare for an invasion of England. He secured papal approval for his campaign, and he assembled an army and fleet from scratch, being completely ready to invade by August. However, due to the bad weather, typical England, he was not able to make a move until late September. By this point, Harold, who had been preparing for William's invasion, had been distracted by a separate invasion of Harold Hardrada in the north. Whilst Harold was completely distracted by this invading force, William was able to land in the south unopposed, building a castle and waiting for Harold's return instead of probing further into the country. King Harold's force was able to defeat Hardrada's army, and immediately after this battle, the king marched his army down to London. And instead of staying there and resting his exhausted troops, which probably would have been the best decision, he instead decided to engage William at Hastings. And so the famous battle to decide England starts. The Battle of Hastings started at 9 AM on the 14th of October 1066, and lasted all day long. At first, the Normans suffered heavy casualties. However, when a number of William's troops panicked and started to flee, some of the English soldiers broke formation and decided to pursue the fleeing group. During this time of panic, a rumour spread that William had died, and so the Norman forces began to falter. William then presented himself to his troops and rallied them, being able to destroy the English that had broken formation. He then realised that due to some of the English leaving their formations, the army was considerably weakened, and so he strategically organised 2 more such fake retreats, successfully tricking the English and weakening their front lines substantially, turning the tide of the battle. It's believed that at some point in the afternoon, Harold was killed, and on this the English army was defeated and mercilessly destroyed, with William being the victor of the day. Despite their king being killed, the English refused to give up. But by this point, the writing was on the wall. William secured first Dover, then Kent, and Canterbury, as well as sending a force to capture Winchester. He then entered and captured London, forcing Edgar and several important nobles to submit to him, winning the war and building a castle in London in order to secure his power. William was then crowned King of England on Christmas Day of 1066, remaining in the country for some time in order to consolidate his power. A number of the English nobles were actually able to retain their titles, including Edwin of Mercia, Morcar of Northumbria, and Wulfiof, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, of Northampton. However, William replaced many unlucky nobles with his Norman friends and allies. In March of 1067, William felt secure enough to return to Normandy, leaving behind his half-brother Odo and William Fitz-Osborne, his staunch supporter, as regents in his absence. Whilst William enjoyed some much-deserved time in Normandy, some of the English began to rebel. And how did the regents of England deal with these rebellions? They conducted a mass campaign of just building a shit ton of castles all across the country to flex on the English and completely break their resolve, being fairly successful. After some time, the king returned in December of 1067 and quickly wiped out all resistance efforts, as well as defeating a force led by Harold II's sons without incident. However, things would not go so smoothly for very long. Many important nobles, including some of the ones that had previously retained their titles, rebelled, which culminated in Edgar Atheling, a former claimant to the throne, encouraging the northern population to revolt. However, it would not be so easy this time for William to defeat the rebellion, as they refused to meet him in battle. And so to end this revolt quickly, William commenced what became known as the Harrying of the North, a brutal campaign to starve out and force the rebels to surrender, by using scorched earth tactics, completely decimating towns, farms, and people alike. Not surprisingly, the rebels and English nobles quickly surrendered, but not before quite possibly 75% of the northern population being killed. On this, William completely replaced the English nobles with his Norman counterparts, and truly secured his reign, but at a hefty cost, one which he would repent for in his later life. Oh, and yes, whilst he was doing all of this killing and decimating and all of that stuff, he was building castles everywhere, like a ridiculous amount of them. Because why not? It's just fun, I guess. For the next several years, William dealt with some invasions and rebellions like normal, but he never gave up on his dream of building more castles, as well as constantly transferring between his 2 different lands. One thing that was extremely interesting about William's style of leadership was that Normandy and England were treated as 2 completely separate entities, despite being controlled by the same person. Whilst William was in Normandy, he swore fealty to the French king and acted as his subordinate, but when in England he ruled completely unopposed and as a king. As well as this, the governmental systems of the two territories just being completely separate and different. And I just think this is such an interesting way to rule. It's like he ruled over two completely different countries, instead of treating them both as the same, like a lot of other rulers would have done. Despite William being a family man through and through, he had a lot of problems with his eldest child, Robert. Around 1078, Robert struck out, possibly frustrated that he was not given any titles or power, and he began raising his forces, becoming supported by many of William's enemies. William then pursued his son's forces until he laid siege to them at this castle. I'm not even going to try pronouncing the name. After 3 weeks of siege, Robert's forces came out of the castle and staged a surprise attack on William's army, being able to catch William completely off guard. It is said that during the battle, William was unhorsed by Robert, and he was narrowly saved from death by an Englishman named Toki, who gave his life for the king. William then lifted the siege as the situation was really dire, and by the 12th of April 1080, the father and son reached an agreement, with William announcing that Robert would receive Normandy upon his death. Fast forwarding a few years to 1085, and William ordered what he is perhaps best known for, the Domesday Book. This was a complete collection of all land, value, peasants, ploughs, livestock, etc. that every single person in Britain owned, in order to tax them more effectively. A very controversial move, but one that benefited the English coffers greatly. In 1087, William was conducting an expedition in France when he was heavily injured by the pommel of his saddle. I like to think that he just hit his balls so hard that he died. It's just kind of funny. Anyway, he passed away from his injury on the 9th of September 1087, leaving Normandy as promised to Robert and England to his second son, William. What follows is an absolutely batshit insane turn of events that sounds like they would come out of some sort of sitcom. So when he dies, everyone that was surrounding his deathbed, all of his loved ones and those that he cared about, just left him. Just ran away to secure themselves. Like, his corpse was just left in bed to rot for ages, and then, obviously, eventually, his body was sent to an abbey in Caen. But when they tried to commence the burial, some bloke just turned up, and he claimed that he'd been cheated out of the land that the abbey was built on. And it turned out he had evidence that proved him right. So the church officials had to, in the middle of a king's burial, pay off some random guy to keep quiet. And then when they actually tried to bury William, his body was way too large for the tomb, and when they forced him into it, he exploded. He literally exploded, forcing everyone to vacate the area due to the rancid smell. The entire story is utterly insane, but it's all true. And so ends the reign of England's first Norman king, William the Conqueror. Thank you for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, it would help me out. Anyway, that's enough from me. Until I see you next, bye bye.